Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week is going to be the turn of an actor. It is Candy Clark, who appeared in the 1973 classic American Graffiti and then went on to, star in lots of films. But it was her 1976 film when she plays the character Mary Lou in The Man Who Fell to Earth, directed by Nicolas Cage and starring David Bowie. Yes, David Bowie. So I was particularly excited to get an interview with her, as you do. So this is it. Yes, there's not much else to say really, apart from a little bit about the issues we had. Nothing drastic, but there was a connection to do with our landline or Zoom, which didn't work very well at the beginning, and then I think the mobile phone didn't work. But we got there in the end. I know, exciting background. Information which you don't probably need to know, but I thought I'd give it to you anyway, because there was a certain, panic in my voice, I think. But anyway, look, she's from, where was she from? Yes, Fort Worth, Texas, which is slightly important to this, because we start talking about the early formative years. Candy Clark, it's over to you. Tell us more. And by the way, there's a fantastic little bit at the end when she talks about David Bowie.
Well, I think I left Fort Worth in 1968, and before that I was graduated high school in 65, didn't go to college. I was the oldest of 5 children, and we were kept abreast of what was going on through magazines like Life magazine and Look magazine. And but Fort Worth was kind of very conservative back then, and not many people were doing the long hair thing. Mostly it was, or the Twiggy makeup or the Sassoon haircut or any of that. It was, people were pretty square back then in Fort Worth.
Yes.
Right now, because of the internet, everyone's able to keep up with what's going on in styles and fashion, if they so choose. But back then, you had to kind of rely on magazines and a little bit of television. Back then, television, the news was basically, local news, or there was some national news. But it looked really interesting, the hippies in San Francisco and, Haight-Ashbury and all of that. But it was really so far out of my realm that, I did get a Sassoon haircut, a Fort Worth Sassoon haircut, and it came out so bad because I went to a little local beauty shop and I was crying because it was like nothing like the Sassoon that you saw in the magazine. And the lady said, "Oh, yeah, I can do this." And it was so horrible. And I think a friend of mine picked me up on his little motorcycle, and I cried the whole way home, hanging on to, I was sitting on the back. But, Fort Worth was, it was known as Cowtown or Where the West Began. That was the logo on the newspaper. They had 2 newspapers, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and I forget what the other one was. And we subscribed, but it was basically local news. So you didn't get to experience what was really going on in San Francisco and Los Angeles and all of that.
Yes.
Just by looking at magazines. You tried your best, but, it wasn't the same.
Yeah. And did bands and sort of films start to sort of filter in through to sort of various channels? I just wondered if the first time you bought a single or the first time you bought an album or went to see a band during that period.
Well, we were really, really poor, and so we weren't buying too many. I don't even think we had a record player, so we certainly weren't buying records back then. But I did go to a few concerts. Mostly they were like James Brown concerts or Chuck Berry. and it was very rare that went to concerts, but the ones I went to, I enjoyed. I went to a James Brown concert, and at the end, me and my friend, we had a great time, and we were getting in our car to leave, and another older teenager came over and hit my friend in the eye, punched him in the eye, and then he was knocked out, and that's how kind of the whole evening ended, of him, with a bloody face, and so, that's Texas for you. You get punched for no reason.
Yes.
But, back then, Texas was it was bring your own bottle. So a lot of people would very much overdrink. And the bars just sold setups, which were just a Coca-Cola. And that was what a bar sold, was a Coca-Cola, a mixer. And so as a result, people would very much overdrink because they're pouring their own drinks out of the bottle. And that finally, Texas wised up that they were losing a lot of money by selling, only Cokes and setups and ginger ales. And, the law changed, and now, like everywhere else, they sell it by the, the mixed drink. But back then, there was a lot of heavy drinking in Texas. That was before seatbelts and, car crashes would happen. And, there was a lot of negativity going on in that department. When I was in high school, Kennedy got shot and killed, and that was a really, really, really horrible day. And, the funeral and all of that really was devastating. That really changed America in a big way.
Yes. And did it feel a very big divide where you were between, the sort of so-called right and left? Did it, or the conservative?
No, it was very conservative, so it must have been pretty much right. Right wing or Republican or conservative. I don't know. I wasn't involved in any politics back then. I didn't care. I didn't notice. But I did like President Kennedy, and I think the whole U.S. loved him, and it just really smashed us, and, it hasn't really recovered, I don't think, from that incident.
And when people like Marilyn Monroe died, did that ever sort of have any effect on you? I mean, when, because they're such iconic...
Well, I read about it, but it was, far away. It was in California. And, I did follow her career a bit, but, we didn't have any money to go to actual movies. Mostly just went to the drive-ins. And by then, the movies, had been out for a while. And then they'd wind up at the drive-in. And went to a few kiddie matinees when we were kids, where they'd have a double feature and get in on a Saturday for a dime or whatever. But
yes. And did you see?
Mainly watch television.
And I was going to say, did films like Easy Rider sort of appear in your life at all?
Well, that happened way back in the 70s. So I was already here in Los Angeles, and I watched that. What year do you think it came out?
Good question. I'd say 19... God, you put me on the spot there, haven't you?
74, 75, 73, somewhere in there. Yeah, I was already here. I got to Los Angeles in 1971.
Yes.
And,
but before that, how did you manage to... not escape, but how did you sort of make your move to leave your, the hometown and find a different world?
Well, I was, my friend of mine and I, we were, I graduated high school, and my friend Judy and I were looking for work. We got hired as floor models for a manufacturer's clothing lines at the Dallas Apparel Market. And there was a man that we were working for, And what that job entailed was going behind a curtain, changing clothes, and coming out and showing the buyers, the outfits, and then going back behind the curtain. And, that was the job of showing off someone's clothing line, a manufacturer. And the man that we were working for, we were teenagers, and he gave me the card and said, "Hey, if you're ever in New York, look me up." Well, that was the last thing you needed to say to two poor girls from Fort Worth, Texas. Of course, my friend and I, Judy, we started plotting our trip. How are we going to get to New York, And at that time, TWA was offering youth fair tickets in the summer, and I saved up enough money to buy a ticket, and so did Judy. But the day we were leaving, she just totally disappeared, and it turned out she had been arrested for shoplifting. And I went to I got on a midnight flight, and I flew to New York City by myself, and I was going to stay for a week, and see the place. And as we were coming in for a landing, it was dawn. The sun was coming up in New York City, and I was seeing it from the air because I was sitting at the window of the airplane, and it was all like this beautiful pink and gold city. It was, with that dawn light on it. It was just gorgeous. I thought, you know what? I'm never going back to Fort Worth. I decided from the air that I was moving to New York City. And I decided I was never going back to Fort Worth, and I didn't. I wound up staying there for 4 years.
Blimey. And that was quite an interesting time, wasn't it? Because there was so much art and culture and change, and you must have, that...
Oh, all the designers like Betsy Johnson and Paraphernalia and all these great young designers, Mary Quant, and they were just all blooming in New York City, and it was a great time for fashion and for discotheques and just meeting people and couch surfing. And, back then you didn't have to worry that someone was going to be a serial killer or, you didn't think anything of that. You just, moved in with people, moved out, moved on. It was a great time, very easygoing.
Yes.
People were hitchhiking, and there was just no fear amongst, that all changed with, I guess Richard Speck, who was a serial killer, and also Charles Manson.
Yes.
So,
but you must have been...
quit hitchhiking thing.
Yeah, that would have knocked that on the head. But during that period, there would have been a lot of, concerts and festivals and happenings. And also Woodstock appeared in that sort of period as well. So you must have...
I wasn't ever a big concert person. Never. A lot of times concerts are way too loud for my ears and kind of hurt me more than they're pleasurable.
Yes.
And so when I do a concert or a small club, I have to stuff all kinds of paper in my ears, and that's, it's nice, but it's not, my ears are way too sensitive for that. And it's especially the high notes, the treble sounds are really, the bass doesn't bother me. It's the high guitar sounds, and it always has.
Yes, absolutely. And then, as with every good story, you get a massive break, don't you, with John Huston in the film Fat City from 1972.
Oh, yeah.
So John Huston, his kind of CV is kind of quite amazing in so many ways, but he'd also sort of worked with people like early 60s. He'd worked with people like Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable and Montgomery Cliff. God, I wish I could say that properly. So he'd got an amazing CV. So how did you manage to sort of land that little number?
Oh, I tried out for the role.
And?
I was living at that point. I'd met a casting director in New York City, and I had wanted to be an extra. I was modeling and I was becoming quite successful, but I wanted to earn some extra money. So I went to this casting office and he got me a little gig being an extra on a movie with Dustin Hoffman called Who is Harry Kellerman and Why is He Saying Those Things About Me? And that was the title of it, a very long title. But I really liked being an extra. You know, I liked watching the Dustin Hoffman, and you know, I liked talking to the other extras, and you know, it was really fun. So I wanted to go back. I went back to the same casting office and said, yeah, I would really like to do more of this. And while I was there was another Los Angeles casting director called Fred Roos, and Lynn Stallmaster, who was the person I initially went to see, said to Fred, hey, this is Candy Clark, you know, it's just an introduction. And it was that time where you would just go, and Fred Roos said, hey, would you like to go with me to watch them shoot the screen test for The Godfather? But like I said, you didn't think anything of, you know, it was a time when people were not scary or creepy. It just seemed normal to walk off or hitchhike or do any of that stuff, you know. And so I said, yeah, well, I'd love to go. And so we got in a cab together and went out to Queens, I think it was, and watched Francis Coppola doing screen tests for The Godfather. And I watched Jimmy Caan and all kinds of male actors trying out for different parts in the movie, and hung out with Francis Coppola. That's just the way it was. You know, it was real easy going.
Yes, I know. It sounds so casual in a kind of groovy sort of way. Because I was going to say, I mean, you'd work with, you know, obviously John Huston in that particular film, and was that quite a life-changing experience? Was that something that?
Yes, it was. Fat City, trying out for that, and did a screen test, and the next thing I knew, I was up in Stockton, California, and I had met Jeff Bridges on the screen test, and then it was love at first sight. We just boom, you know, and we were together for 3 or 4 years, and from that movie. So yeah, it was life-changing, and I decided I was moving to Los Angeles. You know, I was living in New York and making headway on my modeling career, and I just up and moved to Los Angeles, and Jeff and I moved in together, and you know, that's how I got to LA.
Yes, well, it's quite a nice way to get to LA, isn't it? Really, let's face it.
Oh yeah, boyfriend, because I had no boyfriend in New York City.
Yes, I know, but
I had
then
a lot of friends, but no romance.
Well, it's quite interesting because I suppose they're more the mid-'60s, but there'd been films like A Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, which was probably the late 50s, but then you also had On the Waterfront with Marlon Brando. So a lot of those kind of massive films, and then the Godfather films appeared, which were quite huge. And you'd work with, obviously, John Huston in Fat City, then George Lucas, American Graffiti, and then Nicholas Roeg in The Man Who Fell to Earth. So you were on quite a roll in the early 70s, weren't you? Let's face it.
Yeah, very much.
So on the latter part, you know, the Man Who Fell to Earth, which was quite it's become one of those kind of films, hasn't it? Which everyone just a cult classic. What was that like for you, and how did you sort of manage to get the part for that?
Well, I was introduced to Nick Roeg through Cy Litvinov, who became the producer of The Man Who Fell to Earth. And I think Nick and I were having lunch, you know, we were having lunch, but he had a meeting at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and then we were going to go have lunch. And so he had like a 2-hour meeting. And so I just sat in the lobby, and he said, while you're waiting, just read the script. Tell me what you think. And so I'm reading The Man Who Fell to Earth, and I'm like, he comes out and he said, "What'd you think?" And I said, "Fantastic." He said, "Do you want the part?" It was that easy. It was like, wow, yes. And then it was like 6 months, for them to get the money together and, start hiring people. And David got on board, and Buck Henry and Rip Torn. And, it took 6 or 7 months. So at that point, I had read the script since I knew I had the part so many times. And I kind of figured out how I wanted to do this because in the story, a lot of time is passing. So you have to convey to the audience that, you're getting older, your styles are changing. The only character that didn't age was the man who fell to earth, the David Bowie character. And the rest of us got older and older. So there was a lot to figure out,
Yes.
To convey time passing. And, so it
And
was...
And I was going to just say, I mean, had you, because it's kind of an interesting story, because obviously it's, David Bowie, who is David Bowie. I mean, did you know much of his work before you met him?
What is really funny, I had seen the movie, I think it was called Ziggy Stardust, where he had that one-legged knitted outfit on.
Oh, yes, classic.
And, was that Ziggy Stardust?
Yeah, that was the Ziggy Stardust and possibly Aladdin.
I had seen that at the theater in New York City. I think I went by myself, and watched this movie. But that was years prior to this getting cast in Man Who Fell to Earth. But, I thought it was kind of, strange. I didn't follow his career. And so when he got cast, Nick Rogue and I, because I had such a big part in the movie, we went to see David Bowie and talked to him. And, he was just, to me, since I'd never seen him live in concert, he was just the actor that I was going to be opposite of. And so I wasn't overly impressed or underly impressed. It was just like meeting another actor. And it was only after we finished the movie, got invited to see him as the Thin White Duke. And I'm like, oh, my God. And it was a good thing that I hadn't seen him in concert, because I would have been like a fan instead of, working with, I would have had a whole other outlook to David Bowie. And he was so good on stage. And, but when we worked together, one-on-one, in a scene, he was just really, really good. He was really sweet. And he liked to run the dialogue, because that's really important to me, to learn it backwards and forwards. And it was so well written that, it was important to learn it. So we would be very naturalistic in our parts. So it was like us talking instead of, reciting lines. So he liked to, we could run it 100 times and he never got tired or bored. So I attribute that to him being on stage and, rehearsing a lot with the bands. Every time they change, a location or a venue, they have to go and, play their songs and make sure it. So he was very used to rehearsing. So it didn't bother him at all. A lot of actors think they get stale with running the lines, but it only helps me.
Yes, absolutely. And because
I'm struggling, like, what's the next thing I'm supposed to say? Oh no. I'm thinking of that. When I have it memorized, I'm just looking at the other actor and we're, doing our thing.
Yes. And the scenes in that film, because most of it's sort of filmed I think, towards the middle of 75. And it's in places like New Mexico and Albuquerque and White Sands, which is a beautiful national park. So it was a relatively... It must have been a very intense kind of film for the crew and also the cast, because there wasn't a huge cast. So what's it like to...
I don't think it was intense, because Nick Rogue had his British crew people he knew were the crew, the
Yes.
cinematographer. All these were a full British crew came to New Mexico, which was very unusual. But they all knew each other, so they were all pals. And about 4:00, they had a bar, in one of the trucks, and they would crack it open, and it was a very upbeat, happy crew.
Yes, absolutely. And
There was no squabbling or anything. So they all knew each other.
yeah. And did
They
it,
all got along.
I mean, with your experience of being in quite a lot of films, do they all change? Is it all very different from one film to another when you have to get into that part? And I just wondered how that affects you kind of emotionally and on quite a psychic,
It's always weird to walk on the first few days of a set because, it's all a bunch of strangers and you're kind of jittery because, yeah, am I going to be able to do this part? You don't know until you actually start doing it. And then everybody relaxes. Everybody's suffering from the same, I guess, agitation of new location, new people, the beginning of a film, how's it going to go? And then everything settles in and everybody's, relaxed with each other. But it takes a day or two. But the whole trick about being on a movie, you really kind of have to jump in and become friends with a whole bunch of strangers like really quickly because time is short. You only have a certain amount of time to get this work done. So, everybody just has to get along
yes.
as best as possible really quickly. It's like being with a circus, There's the wires, there's the lights, there's, the actors, there's the makeup, there's wardrobe. Everybody has to play their part, and, it just keeps unfolding. And then when it's over with, it's really sad because it's been a real tight, experience. And by then, everybody's attached to each other, and it's wonderful. I really love it.
Yes, I will. Well, I can imagine. And also, I mean, I know I've heard sort of David Bowie talk about that character that he plays and how he gets quite consumed by it. So it took a lot out of him because he didn't just kind of, finish filming and that was it. It sort of stayed with him. And also he had at that point quite a drug issue going on. So there was that.
You know what? He had promised, and if he was on drugs, he can really hide it well. He seemed very relaxed and very much like what he was photographed. He never seemed like, he was agitated by drugs or dried out or, blowing his nose or anything. And he had promised Nick Rogue that he was not going to do drugs while we shot this film. And if he was, he certainly, it didn't change his behavior or his persona at all.
No.
And if he was, there was never anything on his face. He was never disappearing.
He kept it together.
He might have just said that because he liked to create mystique about himself.
Yes. Well, I think Nick Rhodes had seen that film, hadn't he, which was made where he was driving through California or the West Coast, and he was talking about the milk and the fly in the milk, and he was a bit like that. And I think at that stage he had a little bit of an issue with cocaine, but I did read that he'd also promised.
If he was, which I really doubt, if he was so discreet that you would never even think of it. You would never suspect.
Yes. Well,
because usually people with cocaine or have the sniffles, they disappear, they want to go to the bathroom a lot. There's just a whole behavior that wasn't going on when we did the film.
Yeah. And does it, for you, did it when it finishes, you know, probably on one level, it might feel like, oh, that's a good bit of work. But then when you sort of get back to your apartment and it's kind of finished and over, and then you're sort of waiting for it to be edited and then eventually screened, how do you cope with that emotional moment of being in such a sort of a group of people and a family almost to kind of being back at home?
It didn't ever, I didn't look back with like, oh, I'm so sad. But what I would do is look forward to the Cats and Coos screening, thinking that it was going to be great and excited about going forward. I was never regretful about leaving all those people.
No.
Like, oh, it's so sad that it's over with. No, it was great while it was going on. We always knew it was going to be over with. And, you just wait for the next thing, which is, the opening, the red carpet, whatever.
Yes.
Meanwhile, you're living your life, you're doing other things. But...
And with that period between finishing the filming and then the red carpet, is it nice to sort of have a sort of almost a reunion again to catch up with a few people?
Definitely. For sure.
Yes.
For sure.
I can imagine. It would be fantastic. But then...
It's very exciting.
Yes, absolutely. And you must feel chuffed because, those films have now gone down in sort of film history, haven't they? And are sort of studied at...
They sure have.
And that must feel one of those great moments, because I know with sort of sticking on the same film, but then decades later, there's this kind of play, isn't there, Lazarus, which is kind of almost taking, the man who fell to earth and then sort of bringing it up to date.
I knew that, David and I didn't stay in contact, no. But I knew that he was doing that play because it has written up in the, on the internet. And I kept thinking, I got to book a ticket, and I got to go to New York and go to opening night and surprise him, not let him know I was coming or anything, just be in the audience, and then afterwards, walk up to him and see if he even remembered me. And so I kept putting it off. I didn't do it. And then the opening night came, and I was still here in California. And I looked at his pictures because they had some press pictures of him backstage, and I thought, wow, he looks strange. He looks, I don't know, it doesn't look like him. He looked kind of stressed. And it later turned out that he was suffering from some sort of cancer. I don't even know what it was. And but I really regret not going, flying in and surprising him, because that was basically, the last time he would be seen, basically.
Yes.
Except on his video that he did of his music, where he had that wraparound and the button eyes and all of that.
That's right. Yes, Lazarus. Yes.
That was basically the last time he was seen in person.
I know.
So missed I regret that. That's for sure.
Yeah. And then, as the decade progressed, your next film was The Big Sleep. So obviously, the 70s had been really quite an extraordinary decade. And were you still managing to sort of keep it together as well?
What do you mean, keep it together?
Well, with a lot of people in the world of the arts, there's normally a good sort of 5 years where things are sort of like, if it does happen, it goes often really quite smoothly. And then there's often moments where just keeping everything, all the plates spinning and keeping one's kind of, I suppose, because it's kind of quite an unusual life, just keeping one's sanity, really. I just wondered how that was feeling.
Oh, no, I never had a problem with my sanity, no, or depression or any of that. That's not the kind of person I am.
Yeah.
I don't, I've done probably 80 different projects, maybe more. And, there's always something else around the corner. But no, I never had problems with drugs or heavy alcoholism or depression or any of that. Just never did.
Which is amazing. Well, which is amazing and good as well, obviously, because well, most people there's a moment where there's a bit of a little, like a bit of bad internet connection, isn't it? It just gets a bit sort of fuzzy, and then you think, oh dear, that wasn't such a great period. Because obviously, it's quite an interesting career that you've chosen. So I just wondered how one keeps the sort of enthusiasm going. Has it always been quite a sort of? Have you always managed to keep it on a sort of an even keel, so to speak?
Have I been able to keep on an even keel? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not prone to depression. I'm not prone to regret. Looking back with a lot of regret. There's a few moments like not showing up at David Bowie's play, but I don't keep going over and over and over my regrets. I have them, and then, it just so happened that that's what happened, and we go forward.
Yes. And obviously, going quite a bit of a jump here, you ended up working in Berlin, didn't you,
Yeah, in a play. This man wrote this. Well, his thing was he would interview you and record everything you said, and then that would become the play. And you can't imagine how hard it is to memorize your life in a certain order with certain things that you said when he interviewed you. It's like you and I are doing this interview, but then you type it up, and then I have to memorize it.
That is tricky.
So it is tricky. You would think, oh, that's easy. You're just, saying your own life. But, it becomes very difficult to memorize, even that was hard. But it was a 3-woman play, and it was all kind of based on each person, told their story, and then they had to memorize it, and then they had to, say it on stage. The thing is, the guy that wrote it was a great idea, and it was kind of based on, I guess he really loved Louise Brooks and her independence and all of that, and how she, survived Hollywood but the thing is, he had, he was really he worked at a postal office or something, and he had no idea how to advertise what he had done. As a result, nobody ever came to the play. So we wound up just kind of doing it, and, for very small audiences. But it was still 2 weeks in Berlin, 2 weeks prior recording your story, and then he typed it up, and then go fly back and do 2 weeks of the theatrical run with no audience. But I love Berlin. That was a real plus,
Yes. Yeah, that must have been one of them. Yeah. Well, it's good. It's always good to test yourself in these things, isn't it, really, with a bit of avant-garde.
Yeah, it was really, really great. And Berlin's a very, very interesting city. A lot of wonderful. I ate so much Wiener Schnitzel. I loved it. Yeah, every restaurant. I'll have Wiener Schnitzel and a beer. But it was just wonderful. They had, farmers markets, and it was just a real walkable town, especially the section I was in. But, yeah, it was a great experience. Even though nobody came to see us, it was still fun.
Well, it's got to be done. If you could have said something to a 16 or 18-year-old self, starting out, what advice or kind of wisdom from all the decades that you've had, would you sort of whisper in their ear? I just wondered if there was anything that you thought this would be a really good thing to, just to sort of focus on or just keep an eye on.
I would have. I always had a fear of auditioning and trying out for parts, so I would have talked to myself how to conquer that fear, because I've lost so many opportunities in many different projects in film because I get too nervous on an audition because I really want the part, and so I choke at the bat, as they say, and so that would be basically somehow get over that section.
Yes.
But as it was, even though I had the great fear of trying out for parts in people's offices, I still managed to snag a few opportunities,
Yes. And did you, because I suppose, as you can tell, I was obsessed with, David Bowie and The Man Who Fell to Earth. But American Graffiti has obviously sort of put a huge chapter in your life. I mean, with that particular film, when you were making it, did you have any idea of the kind of the importance and the kind of impact that was going to have, or did it just feel like, well, this is exciting?
I always thought it was going to be a smash. It was exactly what we did in Texas. The script was great. The characters were great. What you didn't realize when we were shooting it, and I really got along with Charlie and, the guy who played Toad, Charles Martin Smith. We really got along great. And all the actors hung out together when we weren't working and had lunch, and it was really tight-knit. And I always felt that it was going to be a hit. I always felt that way. And then when we had the cast and crew screening, I remember it was a packed house, because friends were there and stuff. And I was sitting on the steps, the staircase of the theater. You know how it's raked and you have all those steps. I was sitting, it was a packed house. And I remember sitting there, and then Rock Around the Clock came on, and the first view of Mel's Drive-In, and that great picture of Mel's and the actor, the characters riding in on their cars and mopeds and all of that. And the whole audience stood up and cheered just from that first few images. And I thought, we got a hit. Sure enough, we did.
Yes. And
it was a very low-budget film, and total cost with music, they got 41 songs for $40,000. Total cost with music was $850,000.
Yes, that's amazing.
And it made millions. Without American Graffiti, George Lucas wouldn't be the billionaire he is today.
Yes, because I remember in Star Wars, one of the cast said, I won't get a fee, I'll just have a percentage. And everyone just said, I'll just have the fee because I don't think this is going to be a great film. I can't remember who that was, actually. But obviously that paid his pension off. Did a film like American Graffiti, has that paid your pension off?
After the fact, before it came out, George Lucas split one of his points. And he didn't know which way it was going to go. He split one of his points 10 ways. So each main actor, or, whoever he chose, I don't know who the 10 people were. I know some of them, but I don't know all of them. 1/10 of 1% we got. And every year I get, it's dwindled down, but I think last year I got like $700. And it's like almost 50 years past, since we shot it. So, yeah, it was a big help. Thank you, George.
That is quite something, actually, isn't it? Yes. And on that sort of basis, because I know I keep on about it, but you were born the same year as David Bowie, which I always thought was very cool. Have you got any projects in the pipeline at the moment, or has it just been
No, we've gone through a big pandemic, And no,
Yes. Is
should
it?
open up. I project that this will be behind us by fall, and all next year will be great.
This is true. We are all looking forward. Well, in this country, I've sort of put it down to September when schools and colleges and universities go back. I think.
Yeah, by fall we should be pretty well out of this.
Yes, that's cool.
With the vaccine.
With the
so
vaccine.
You and I are on the same wavelength on our projection. We'll see if we're right. We'll see if we're wrong. But at least we have a goal.
We have.
Like a light at the end of our tunnel. It's going to be under control.
It will be fine. It's all going to be good, actually. I mean, just on that.
So far, you and I made it. We didn't get sick.
We didn't, actually. We
dodged this thing. And then finally, I got both my vaccines. And we dodged for a year and a couple of months. So far, so good.
I know. And let's face it, since the Black Death, which was hundreds of years ago, there hasn't been anything like this before. Because my parents, they went through a Second World War and they said, well, we went through that, but we've never been through something like a pandemic. So it's a kind of first.
They have. There was a big one on the First World War, the 1918.
Yes, the Spanish flu. That's right.
Yes, and that killed. That was before science, really knew what, viruses were. The microscope, all of that was, in its early stages. No X-rays. Madame Curie was working on it, but it was, and that lasted 3 years. But they really weren't like, how is this being spread? So now we know, hey, they were doing, they didn't know about bacteria. When your surgeon would work on you, did he really wash his hands in between? No, they didn't know. So things lasted longer, but now we know. And, with the computer and all of that, they can make a vaccine like in a few months, when before it would take years. And, they just need the formula. And, we're going to get out of this pretty quick.
This is true.
The vaccine. And that's the only way out.
I know. So, we are so relieved.
Yeah.
This is so true, actually. And did your, I know I keep saying last word. And how did because you said you were one of five and, your parents, did they get to sort of see, sort of, I wouldn't say bathe in your success, but did they feel proud of you when they saw?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And then my mother started getting some of the benefits of my success because I bought her a house, before I even bought myself a house. And, so, yeah, definitely.
That's fantastic. Well, look.
It was a good thing.
Yes, well, I'm so pleased. And I have to say, I did love American Graffiti when I was growing up. But then a few years later, it was kind of during the 80s when I saw The Man Who Fell to Earth. And it always had a big impact. And, visually as well. I mean, those images of...
Yeah, Tony Richmond.
They were just so stunning. And, I've got various books which, I've sort of gaze at with amazement of the cast and you all shooting in sort of, like I said, New Mexico and Albuquerque in the white sand. So it...
the beautiful skies of New Mexico.
I know. Do you still have...
Some shots that are just breathtaking. I mean, they're just so beautiful. And that's all due to Tony Richmond, who's a master of lighting and making people look fantastic.
Yes. And did you? I mean, I know that Jeff, David's best friend, was on the kind of cast, not the cast, but he was in the crew, wasn't he? Jeff McCormack, I think his name was. But yes,
if he said he was there, he was there. I mean, there were a lot of people, and my focus was on my work.
Yes. Well, anyway,
the main characters that were closest to me, like Nick Rogue and my brother Randy worked on the film. I got him a little gig there, and if Jeff says he was there, he was there. There's a lot of people that, you get introduced to, but you're so focused on what you're doing that, Sorry, Jeff, I'm sure you had a great time.
Yes. Anyway, well, look, Candy, thank you ever so much for your time, and thank you for sort of sticking with
I do remember Angela Bowie being there.
You do?
And some of his, Ava Cherry and some of his, friends like that were there, definitely.
Oh, Ava, yes.
I came for a while.
Nice.
Angela came for a while. Ava Cherry, who did his wardrobe, was there. So, yeah, there were a lot of people I do remember.
Nice one. Oh, that must have been fantastic, because I know I did an interview with Ava quite recently, and yes, she was on Young Americans album, and obviously Angie was his wife. So it must have been, yes, but then, like you said, you were focused on the part, and at that stage, David was still just David, not really David, this person who becomes this quite extraordinary character. So you probably just, you said earlier, and I hope I'm kind of paraphrasing this, you weren't a huge fan of him at the time, which was quite a relief. It was only when you saw Stations.
It wasn't that I was not a fan. I became a fan after I saw him live and in concert. But, it wasn't like I was meeting Mick Jagger, someone that I already knew that I liked. It was it's probably coming across wrong, but, I respected him. But to me, he was not a rock star, because if he were, I would be totally in awe, and that would be the wrong way to be doing these characters, Mary Lou and Thomas Jerome Newton. If you're in awe of someone, like you're suddenly working with Marlon Brando and you're all gaga, it makes it really hard to work.
Yes, well, absolutely. That's not quite...
Am I explaining this correctly?
Oh, no, you've explained it absolutely fine, because, it's quite, straight down the line.
No disrespect to his career in rock, in music.
No, absolutely. No, it all makes complete sense. It's good. But look, well, Candy, thank you ever so much for giving me the time for this. And the connection's been great. The landline worked well.
Yeah, it did. And you got on the Ethernet instead of that Skypey thing, which wasn't working.
No, that definitely didn't work. Well, thank you for being patient, because otherwise I would have freaked out. It would have been too much. But anyway,
right.
Look, thanks a lot.
I'm glad we just started over. That was the thing to do.
It was. Anyway, look, take care and have a lovely day.
And send me, when you get it edited and online, send me a connection.
I will. I'll definitely send that over. Okay, take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And that, dear listener, is the end of the interview. I like leaving those last bits in because, they keep it real. Anyway, look, a big thank you to Candy Clark for that, giving me the time for that interview. This has been David Eastaugh, the C86 Show. If you want to contact me, I know I sound very needy, but all the same, there's no harm in that, is there? You can contact me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. Keep it nice and positive. Otherwise, basically don't bother. And also, I've done lots of interviews, so you can find those on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. What else is there? Yes, there's quite a lot on David Bowie if you want to find out more about Mr. Bowie and stuff like that. And also 80s indie pop. Anyway, I'm going to go. Have a great week. Stay safe.